If we go back 10, 12 years ago, I ran customer experience programs for both Best Buy, which is a US-based retailer, as well as United Health Group, which is a US-based health insurance organization. And so really involved with how do you change a culture around a better customer experience. I started this company 7.5 years ago, where we really help organizations understand the customers, not just a what's broken standpoint. I mean, I realize it's the name of the book, but more importantly, where does greatness happen and how do you capture more of that? Now let's go back, first of all, about 10, 12 months ago when this first hit, and cognitive overload really became crucial in the experience, as everybody was going through such a massive change that they simply had a hard time following processes, procedures, so on. It changed the expectation so that we had to become easier to work with, first of all, but that wasn't enough. There's a real problem in the customer experience industry. We think that easy experiences create loyalty. They don't. Easy experiences stop disloyalty, which is important. So that's the first step, though, is to make it easier for people to go through. But it also changed expectations that we had to start being empathetic. Now, we actually had to start being empathetic about 10,000 years ago. That wasn't new, but it suddenly became even more critical for us to understand our customers' emotions and to do something about that, something that most brands are still struggling with. It is that empathy. Let's talk about that. Now in customer experience, we all talk about the importance of emotional experience. Everybody talks about that. If you don't believe emotions are important, well, you're in the wrong industry. So that's why it's really ironic. So we spent the last year trying to learn, what does excellence look like in customer experience? What is fantastic? And we've interviewed over 100 hours of interviews, talking to different CX leaders. We did a survey. I got a chance to shadow great programs. That's where we learned something ironic. So we all talk about how important emotions are in the experience, but how many people actually measure the emotions? And the number is strikingly low. Net promoter score is not an emotion. Satisfaction, not really an emotion. Effort, not an emotion. But that's what everybody measures. But that's not what your customers care about. The customers care about, how do you make them feel? And only a handful of brands actually measure that. And that's the real challenge for us in customer experience, is when are we going to actually start measuring what matters? And that's, first of all, customers' emotions, and second of all, how that impacts their relationship with you. First of all, if you want to keep your net promoter score, go ahead. Most have to keep it. But ask about the emotions. You know, we've been looking at these handful of great brands, and they ask you, do we make you feel happy? That's what Haggerty does that. Do you feel confident working with us? That's from Ultimate Software, now UKG. The VA, Veterans Administration in the US, they ask about your level of trust. But there are not a lot of others that do that. There are a handful of others, but not very many. Very few organizations actually ask how we make you feel. So that's the first thing, is actually map it. And then here's the second part, that's where you start to have influence across the organization, is you take the answer to that question, and then you look at your operational, your behavioral and financial data. What you should find, if you chose the right emotion, is that when that emotion gets better, so does your business. That when you have customers feeling more confident, well, they order from you again.
Yeah.
If you've increased their level of trust, they stay with you even when there's a problem. Now, every organization has different emotions. You have to figure out what those emotions are and which ones most matter. But once you do, start measuring them. And again, it only really works if you then start saying, okay, how does our business get better when we increase that emotion? let me just take a quick step back. Something else we learned in that engagement, all those interviews, the survey, is that most people in customer experience have very little understanding of the technology the company uses to create a better experience.
Yeah.
We understand Qualtrics or Medallia, that's fine, but we don't understand the other part. But these great programs actually get involved with figuring out what technology should be used to improve the experience. And three technologies we learned were used by the change makers more so than anybody else. The first of all was customer health dashboards. So you can actually track in what are customers feeling and tie it to operational outcomes. Not enough just to have survey scores, but bring in those outcomes as well. That's number one. Number two is journey mapping software, which surprised me. I'm a journey mapping guy. See behind me, got journey maps everywhere. We've learned that great brands using that. But getting to your specific question here, and I'm getting there eventually, which is the newest part, because journey mapping software has been out there a while. We like the Quadient platform, which is newer. And obviously, customer health dashboard's been out there a while. But journey analytics orchestration is an area that 5 years from now, you'll be too late, but is just starting to happen. What this does is allow you to, once you've identified what creates, for example, confidence, you're not reliant on a lot of staff to try to do it. You can actually start using technology to create the experience. Or you can actually call a CSR to contact somebody if it's a high level account. You can take the data from across the organizations and start to craft a journey. And that is just starting to hit. In our survey, it was a small percentage of companies, but every company that had implemented it was off the charts in terms of effectiveness. I think what we're going to see is that starting to use shared data across the organization. We'll stop talking only about Net Promoter Score. We'll start talking about frequency of visits. We'll start talking about repeat orders. Those things our partners care about, we'll start talking about them because we need to understand that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the futures, that first of all, start breaking down silos and using the organizational data and integrating ours with it. A number of programs are doing it, they've not many. So that's the first thing. Second of all is actually getting more involved with the strategy organization, including the technology stack, on how we use technology to change the experience. A lot of people in customer experience are talking about surveys. In the future, that's there perhaps, but it's much more about driving actions, about integrating the information and driving technology changes to create a better customer experience. If you were a CX practitioner, and I could ask you only one question to identify whether or not you're driving change in your organization, that one question would be, what are you doing with your data?
Interesting.
For many, it's what do you mean? But if you were able to turn around and say, well, we've actually integrated here, we have the ability to link in our survey scores with customer behaviors and financial outcomes. That's a change maker. So I'd say, first of all, understand and measure customer emotions and then integrate it with the rest of the organizational data. So you can really start to see what creates better organizational outcomes and then drive towards more of that future. That future we're all looking for, which is not just about improved customer outcomes, that's important, but also improved business outcomes.